All right, subcommittee will come to order, and thank you everyone for your indulgence. This is what happens when you disappear into a skiff. So I'll do push-ups after this. Listen, welcome everyone to the hearing of the Readiness Subcommittee on the FY25 budget request for military readiness. I do want to ask unanimous consent that the chair be authorized to declare recess at any time. Without objection, so ordered. I also ask unanimous consent that non-committee members be allowed to participate in today's hearing after all members have had an opportunity to ask questions. Welcome, Mr. Moore. Without objection, so recognized. All right. So thank you to all of our witnesses. Thank you for coming. I understand the preparation that goes into having these hearings in support of the budget. Discussing the FY25 budget request for military readiness. A lot to discuss today, actually a whole host of issues to be addressed as it pertains to each service's military readiness. Obviously, but importantly, ongoing and potential conflicts around the globe is stressing the importance of ensuring our military forces are ready and can be reconstituted to be ready again. The total DoD budget request for FY25 O&M is nearly $338 billion. It is the largest appropriation category, and this funding pays for training, maintenance, sustainment across the services. It is frankly often overlooked or used as a pay-for, but this funding is critical to ensuring our military's readiness. Ranking Member Garamendi and I have seen time and again that this sustainment of existing assets is disregarded for the procurement of new items. And this has led to all kinds of spill-on effects. We have barracks that are in disrepair, ships that can't leave the docks. Our military leaders, I think we as in Congress, our military leaders in the building as a force, I think we really, we say this every year, but we have to do better in this critical area. And I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on how we're going to improve. This subcommittee has spent a lot of time and will continue to do so providing oversight of the unsatisfactory state of our barracks. In particular, the condition of some of this housing is astoundingly bad. It's disgusting in some cases, frankly, and it no doubt must affect both recruiting and retention. We have to provide safe barracks and clean housing that puts our service members' welfare first. I personally remain frustrated and wanting to help, but still frustrated with the readiness of the Navy and our fleet, particularly our surface and subsurface fleet. Not only do we not have enough vessels in the fleets and in the inventory, we can't adequately maintain the ones that we have. Maintenance avails are running long. I know a lot has been put towards this, but they are still longer and more costlier than projected. And the healthy naval fleet is the backbone of the Navy Marine Corps team, critical to our ability to project power abroad. I'm interested to hear from the Navy in particular on how we're working to overcome those issues. Thanks again to our witnesses. I'll stop there. Look forward to your testimony. Mr. Garamendi, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will echo everything that you said, but I'll also repeat it, which an echo is. If I were to summarize, first of all, gentlemen, thank you so very much for your participation today, for the information you've shared with all of us in other meetings. So thank you for that. If I were to summarize the challenge that we face on the Readiness Subcommittee in one word, that word would be sustainment. As I've often said, other subcommittees get to buy the new, bright, shiny stuff. Sadly, the day that that new weapon system is fielded or the ribbon is cut on that brand new barracks, it's also the day that the department starts under-investing in its sustainment. The readiness accounts are the ones that fund maintenance and modernization, training, fuel, resiliency, initiatives, all the rest, much of which was discussed by the chairman. There are also the accounts that get rated to pay for the new, bright, shiny stuff, often to the detriment of our service members. When I say things like that, everyone nods their head in agreement. Yep, he's right, yep. But then time and again, on both sides of the Potomac, we underfund sustainment, or we take from the accounts that fund the training of our soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians, and spend it elsewhere. In previous subcommittee hearings, we have talked about the link between the poor condition of quality of life infrastructure and recruitment and retention of the service members we need. I would argue that underfunding sustainment writ large fuels that problem. According to the Comptroller General, who has analyzed the readiness of our weapon systems over the course of years, the majority of systems in our inventory still fall more than 10% below the department's own capability goals, and I would suggest those goals are often far too low. Unfortunately, I feel that we have become so accustomed to failure in this area that these statistics just don't scare us anymore. They should. If we are struggling this much in peacetime, what does it tell us about how we will do in a contested environment? As the replacement for our legacy systems get more and more expensive, there's even a bigger temptation to sell out sustainment and make it a problem for tomorrow. Finally, I want to talk about aviation safety. This has been a particularly bad 18 months for aviation. We've had an alarming number of fatal accidents. I've been here for almost 15 years now, long enough to know that there isn't a single easy answer that will immediately arrest this trend, this very tragic trend in aviation. But I believe it can, at least in part, be traced back to sustainment. We're losing our experienced pilots to airlines, retention issues. We have aging platforms with low readiness rates, sustainment, and operations and maintenance budgets that fund training that are under prioritized. So often that we can buy whatever new things we need that is on this year's wish list. We're going to see a lot of that as we move through the NDAA and the ultimate appropriations. The question for this committee is to continue to fight for the sustainment of our military. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to hearing from our witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi, as always. Very quickly, want to introduce our witnesses. We have General James Mingus, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, Admiral James Kilby, the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, General Chris Mahoney, Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Jim Slife, Vice Chief of the Air Force, General Michael Gutlein, Vice Chief of Space Operations, and now I will turn it over to Go Army, General Mingus, for his opening remarks.
Thank you. Chairman Waltz,
I know. I had to get it in.
Ranking Member Garamendi, distinguished members of this subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the readiness posture of the United States Army. The Army is ready now to protect our nation and prevail in the toughest moments of combat. We are expanding the competitive space by increasing our lethality through our modernization efforts, strengthening American alliances through combined operations and training, and maximizing opportunities to improve the readiness of our soldiers and their families. The Army's readiness needs mirror the rapidly emerging changes in the character of war, driven by network centricity, advances in sensors, hypersonics, robotics, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence. Armies now can increasingly see further, sense further, shoot further, engage remotely, and with pinpoint accuracy. Time is not on our side. And if we can quickly integrate and fuse these emerging technologies into advanced methods of warfare, we will maintain our decisive advantage in the current and future joint operating environment. Central to this effort is the health and effectiveness of our organic industrial base. During my visit to Scranton Army Ammunition Plant, I personally witnessed firsthand the success of our OIB modernization investments through the production of our new high-yield 155 rounds. And since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, our OIB has doubled its monthly production capacity of 155 from 14,000 rounds a month to 30,000 rounds a month. And by summer of 2025, thanks to the supplemental, we will be at 100,000 rounds per month. As the Army invests in our warfighting capacity, we are simultaneously contributing to integrated deterrence by supporting global campaigns and strategic partnerships, especially in the Indo-Pacific. While visiting the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii, I was impressed by the scale of our preparation and meticulous efforts our soldiers are taking to build and maintain relationships, ensure interoperability, and foster integration with our allies and partners at the Joint Pacific Multinational Readiness Center. This level of collaboration and partnership building is essential towards achieving our shared objectives in the region and is a testament to the hard work and dedication of our troops. In Europe, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine highlights the pressing needs to modernize our defensive capabilities, especially in the fields of unmanned systems and electronic warfare. The use of UAS in Ukraine for reconnaissance and offensive role has been a game changer. We are committed with our joint partners to enhancing our capabilities in these areas to ensure that we remain at the forefront of military innovation. We recently delivered both the Integrated Defeat System, commonly known as the Coyote, and Directed Energy M-SHORAD to bolster our counter-UAS defenses in CENTCOM. That said, the Army's 25 budget request continues to prioritize our most ambitious transformation efforts and prioritizing critical areas like long-range precision fires, integrated air and missile defense, command and control, and contested logistics. Finally, our greatest strength is the readiness of our people. We take care of our people by ensuring our soldiers are ready for combat with viable doctrine, equipment, and realistic training, while simultaneously providing their families with the resources they need to thrive at home. A key part of that responsibility is providing safe, high-quality housing and barracks. During my recent visit to the 11th Airborne Division in Alaska, I witnessed instances of positive impact of our barracks arrangements. The initiatives that we are exploring are not just about physical changes, but it's about fostering stronger bonds among soldiers, their leaders, and promoting a culture of care. I want to emphasize that the Army is fully committed to our barracks sustainment at 100%, and we are also exploring the option of privatizing barracks, starting with Fort Irwin and other installations where it makes sense to do so. We've also achieved historic progress in retention and are optimistic about our recruitment. We are transforming our recruiting enterprise to better compete with the current job market. Our innovative Future Soldier Prep course ensures we bring those who would not typically qualify up to Army standards. And in the end, I am confident that if called upon tonight, our Army can fight and win. And we're making the right choices to ensure we can win in the future. That said, there's still a great deal of work left to be done, and it is absolutely critical that we succeed in our transformation efforts to remain the most lethal, agile, and feared ground combat force in the world. I thank you for your support and appreciate the opportunity to discuss these with your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, General Mingus. Admiral Kilby.
Chairman Waltz, Ranking Member Garamendi, and distinguished members of the committee, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss Navy readiness. I appreciate the recent passing of the Security Supplemental, which will help us address unbudgeted operational costs affecting the United States Navy. Your Navy, as part of the joint force alongside our allies and partners, remains postured and ready to fight and win. Today, with over 100 ships and 43,000 sailors deployed, your Navy operates around the world and around the clock, from seabed to space and in cyberspace. Our active and reserve shipmates and Navy civilians are ready to preserve the peace, respond in crisis, and win decisively in war. This work requires a commitment to readiness, and I appreciate your efforts to ensure America's Navy remains the most powerful Navy in the world. We are strengthening our Navy by focusing on 3 priorities: war fighting, war fighters, and the foundation that supports them. We place primacy on war fighting. When Iranian-backed Houthis sought to disrupt the flow of global maritime trade, the Gerald R. Ford and Dwight D. Eisenhower carrier strike groups, the Bataan Amphibious Readiness Group, and forward-deployed destroyers from Rota, Spain, were there. Our sailors and Marines are effectively countering these threats. We are adapting in the Red Sea and applying lessons learned to prepare for a future high-end fight. Our ability to succeed in warfighting is inextricably tied to warfighter readiness. We are committed to improving quality of life and quality of service, and that begins by taking care of our sailors, our civilians, and their families. In fiscal year 25, we are investing $1.4 billion in quality of service. This augments the $165 million reprioritized in the FY24 bill to improve unaccompanied housing. While we are at historically high levels of retention, we face recruiting challenges this year as we did in 2023. But talent exists in every zip code, and our efforts to help recruit and retain those who answer our nation's call to service. Finally, the foundation underpins our warfighting and warfighter readiness. This includes our installations, which we must view as warfighting platforms, a point made clear in Guam. The devastation brought on by Typhoon Marwar is significant. I would appreciate your support for natural disaster relief funding to address the number of challenges affecting our Navy. Readiness challenges exist in our shipyards as well. Since last November, I visited 3 of our 4 public shipyards. In FY25, we will invest $2.8 billion in our shipyard infrastructure optimization program to recapitalize these key components of naval industry. Additionally, we are investing in the submarine industrial base as we ramp up production of the Columbia-class and Virginia-class submarines. These investments are vital to sustaining our undersea fleet and supporting our commitment to the AUKUS partnership. Our Navy has a culture that strives to think, act, and operate differently. We are committed to transparency, continuous learning, and working together to deliver the Navy our nation needs. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral Kilby. General Mahoney, for your opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chairman Waltz, Ranking Member Garamendi, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to represent your Marines this afternoon to discuss our current readiness and plans to remain ready in the future. The Commandant has outlined his priorities in his budget, one of which is balancing readiness and modernization. He does so as we confront a difficult strategic context. On the one hand, in the Pacific, we are witnessing the greatest arms buildup that our nation has seen since World War II. The scope and scale of the PRC's military expansion presents a formidable challenge that we must deliberately modernize our force to contend with. On the other hand, we operate in a time of increased global tensions, emergent conflicts, and increasingly brazen challenges to the rule-based order, which has underwritten peace for the better part of the last century. It is essential that we meet the demand for the Marine Corps to maintain a high state of readiness today so that we can generate the forces necessary to campaign, deter, or respond to crisis or conflict. We must do so while budgeting for future readiness generated through modernization, our training enterprises, our installations, and the quality of life of our personnel. Fortunately for our service, we identified this challenge early and are already fielding many of the modernized capabilities developed through our force design initiatives. Our fiscal 25 budget request highlights our commitment to maintaining this balance between current and future readiness. We're requesting $17.4 billion for operations and maintenance in fiscal 25, 32% of our total request to sustain our current and projected operational requirements in support of the joint force and national tasking. This operations and maintenance account also funds our FSRM accounts that ensure Marines have quality spaces in which to work and adequate barracks in which to live. But we also seeking to gain momentum toward modernization. 65% of our budget request, $35.2 billion, supports our 4 pillars of force design. And I would also be remiss if I failed to mention the service's receipt of a clean audit opinion. Well, there is much to celebrate in being the first service in the department to achieve such a feat. The greater victory is a blueprint for success for the entire department, and also demonstrating to the American taxpayer that we can end-to-end tell them what we have done with every dollar that has been accorded us. The Marine Corps is appreciative of Congress' assistance and sustained support to build capacity and increase lethality through investments in modernization and readiness. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Mahoney. General Slife.
Thank you, Chairman Waltz. Good afternoon to you, Ranking Member Garamendi, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. The beginning and end of my testimony is that your Air Force remains ready. Nevertheless, the strategic landscape is as complex and dynamic as it's ever been, demanding the Air Force be ready for a spectrum of threats across differing time epochs. The rapidly evolving capabilities of the People's Republic of China demands our full attention, while Russia, North Korea, Iran, violent extremist organizations can't be ignored. At its most basic, the budget before you represents our best judgment about how to allocate risk over time, given the realities of the fiscal constraints and inflationary pressures inherent in today's environment. Could we retain greater force structure or additional platforms intended for divestment? Absolutely. But it would come at the expense of readiness levels or tomorrow's modernization, which is a proxy for tomorrow's readiness. Could we improve upon today's readiness? You bet. But it would come at the expense of today's force structure or tomorrow's modernization. And finally, could we modernize faster? We could, but it would come at the expense of today's force structure readiness. Such is the inescapable logic of allocating risk over time. While the budget before you may not be ideal in an absolute sense, we judge it to be ideal given the relative options we have to work with. The Air Force's FY25 budget request makes several strategic adjustments that will help us maintain satisfactory readiness rates while investing in emerging technology and modern systems to preserve future readiness. Our personnel retention and accession rates are stable. Updated programs and policies aligned to DoD standards are already resulting in a steady flow of new airmen. We've modified incentive programs and invested in better infrastructure and support systems to make the decision easier for airmen and their families to elect to stay in service. We're also updating the way we train. We're rolling out immersive simulation technologies and flight training improvements, maximizing the effectiveness of our pilots while airborne, while also providing realistic training for airmen on the ground. These new training methods are already increasing pilot production and helping our airmen prepare for operations in a more contested environment than that to which they've become accustomed over the last 30 years. Our force presentation models around the world are sufficient for the operational environment that's prevailed since the end of the Cold War, but the agile response needed tomorrow will require a more flexible approach. Our investments in agile combat employment will help us meet those challenges and train our airmen to execute a hub-and-spoke model that enables the speed and lethality which future conflict will require. The Air Force's nuclear enterprise is undergoing much-needed recapitalization, and we look forward to bringing requested systems upgrade and new platforms to the front line as soon as possible. Our FY25 requests will enhance our present nuclear capabilities and offer increased flexibility in the future. The demand for finite resources is fierce, and we strive to be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars while delivering on our highest responsibility, air power in defense of our nation. The Air Force's FY25 budget request is not without risk, but it's acceptable risk to ensure our readiness today and tomorrow. On behalf of the 677,000 total force airmen, civilians, and their families, thank you for your support and steadfast devotion to ensuring that the Air Force maintains its place as the preeminent provider of air power anytime, anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, General Slife, and finally, always good to see our Space Force sitting at the table, General Gutlein.
Thank you, Chairman Waltz. Ranking Member Garamendi, distinguished members of this subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before this body and the American public on the military readiness of the United States Space Force and our continued efforts to sustain such readiness into the future. On behalf of the Secretary of the Air Force, the Honorable Frank Kendall, and the Chief of Space Operations, General Chance Saltzman, I am honored to share with you our readiness vision for the fiscal year 2025. Let me begin by saying that the context for any discussion on readiness of the Joint Force lies on the nation's ability to achieve and maintain freedom of action in space through space superiority. The repeated actions by both the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China underscore the urgency for action. Although we still maintain control of space over our adversaries, they are working hard to close the gap and assert their dominance in space. We cannot afford to let this happen. Space is the foundation for the joint force, and it is the fundamental to our peaceful way of life. GPS alone is an essential part of every aspect of our daily lives, from our cell phones to our banking systems, and even to our ability to get crops out of the field and groceries on the shelves. We cannot let our near-peer competitors overtake us, or we will lose what we hold dear. The investments provided in the President's fiscal year 25 budget maintain our marginal advantage. However, we must seriously consider future space budgets that counter adversary investments and ensure our joint force remains the dominant joint force defending this great nation. As we look ahead, it is clear that the resources necessary to maintain the space capabilities a nation depends on are significantly outpaced by the demand. Our near-peer competitors have not only made space a contested domain, but their activities in space reveal their intentions in a space different profoundly from our own. Rather than ensuring peaceful access to space for all, they strive to seize control of space for their own aggressive purposes. If we fail to keep space and ultimately surrender our superiority in space, every space-enabled benefit we take for granted will be impacted and the world will become a much more dangerous place. The pace of their progress will only continue to accelerate because they are determined to close the capability gap and they are not subject to the same resource constraints that we have. They are not subject to the same processes we follow, and they do not have the same concerns we have in regards to protecting the environment both on Earth and in space for generations to come. Our guardians have clearly demonstrated the capability, the resolve, and the experience necessary to face the challenges posed by our competitors, but there is more to do. As Secretary Kendall and General Saltzman recently unveiled, the Department is launching an effort to re-optimize how we organize, train, and equip our forces in light of great power competition and the looming threat. As part of this re-optimization, the Space Force is implementing a series of key initiatives that will directly impact readiness. First, we are standardizing the way we present space capabilities to the combatant commanders, and we are completing the stand-up and resourcing of our service components in each of the combatant commands. This will ensure seamless integration of space capabilities into the joint force when called upon by the nation during times of crisis or conflict. Secondly, we are building joint warfighting leaders and preparing them for modern warfare. We are redesigning career paths, changing our readiness standards, and increasing the scope, tempo, and realism of our operational assessments and exercises in order to build the culture and proficiency necessary to prevail against the threat. This is the task you created the United States Space Force for. Lastly, we are establishing a new field command focused on preparing the Space Force for the future warfare. Space Futures Command will focus on developing future warfighting concepts and testing those concepts in a modern, live, virtual, and constructive environment against realistic threats and focusing our investments on science and technology to counter the emerging threats. Space Futures Command will channel these lessons learned and technologies developed into a robust objective architecture and force design that will drive future resourcing decisions. I truly appreciate Congress's and this committee's continued support for our guardians and the mission. Your steadfast fiscal provisions have made us the force we are today, and every guardian appreciates it. I look forward to working with you as we defeat tomorrow's challenges together, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Gutlein. I will yield 5 minutes to myself. And first I want to talk about amphibs. The previous commandant of the Marine Corps cited amphib availability at about 32%. Obviously, this is a critical platform to project power around the world. I was just down at Southcom looking at potential Haiti. Unfortunately, yet another embassy that we may have to evacuate, and that capability is not available to that combatant commander, and we could talk about other instances where that's not available. And my understanding is we may go a lengthy period of time in the near future without having any large amphibs available. So my understanding is one of the main drivers of this is out-of-scope work. And, you know, for example, we recently found out that an availability was delayed because of a berthing barge, that a berthing barge was unavailable, which is, I find that, Admiral Kilby, I mean, it's just unacceptable. We've talked about it, but we get once a year to get the vices on the record to talk about the readiness of their force and $850+ billion budget. So, Admiral Kirby, let's talk about what are you doing, what is the Navy doing to get after these issues of maintenance availability, and specifically, what is the Navy doing during the pre-avail inspections to decrease the frequency of out-of-scope work that then creates this ripple effect with industry, and we lose ships?
Chairman Walz, thanks for your question. I agree with you. It is unacceptable. We must have amphibious ships available to support the Marine Corps to form that Navy and Marine Corps team to go do our nation's bidding. Specifically, we found our amphib ships are all, the big deck amphibs in particular with steam plants, are having larger growth work than most of our ships. It's a challenge because of availability of parts, artisans, et cetera, challenge on the industrial base. A way to get at this is to lock down the package for that ship 4 months in advance. That's called A-120. And then we can order the long lead material, et cetera, to get the work done.
And I get your, just in the interest of time, can I get your commitment, and I'll ask the same of the Secretary tomorrow, to stick to that 4-month lockdown?
You have my commitment.
What is the current status of the joint terms of reference for amphib readiness?
It is not yet signed. We just talked about it this morning on the way over here. I think we're close. I don't have a due date for you, but the Commandant and the Chief of Naval Operations want to have that agreed look, that common look, so we can talk in common terms.
General Mahoney, what's the right number of ready amphibs for you to feed the combatant commanders and their O plans and their needs?
I guess I'd answer that with two parts. The first part is you have to have a ready bench, all right? A ready bench, and then on each coast and in the forward deployed naval force, 3 ships, one of which is a big deck LHA, and 2 medium amphibious warships
They're a package.
with qualified crews integrated with Marines and certified to deploy as a 3-ship on time.
So what's the number, the overall number, as we're looking across the budget?
To make those 3 ships on each coast at any one time, 9 in play with a ready bench to feed that.
Which would be how many?
I would defer to how many to make 9. I don't have that.
Okay. Just and I want to stick to the time to get everybody questions, but I will open to if we have time before votes, a second round. On barracks, General Mahoney, you've included $600 million in your UPL and your unfunded list for barracks. Why isn't this included in your base budget? And can you explain, like, how do we get the barracks 2030 goal of satisfactory barracks if you've got it out of your base budget?
Yeah, the Commandant's priority for barracks, I think, is indicated in his base budget. What the UPL does is accelerates our bid in barracks 2030, and I'll just quickly try to break that down.
I got about 30 seconds.
We stood back from the problem and distilled it down to 3 things: modernize material and management, professionalize management, increase the cycle time for furniture, for locks, and then modernization. That's MILCON, that is demo, that's FS, and that's RM. All of those 4 things. Looking at it from those 3 M's.
I would encourage, I've encouraged every one of you that I've sat down with to look at privatization. I want Marines focused on bullets on bad guys, not managing HVAC systems. I just think that is something that we as a force need to take a much harder look at, and there's well-known organizations out there that can manage facilities but still give that buck sergeant access to his Marines, and I think you've got a lot of bipartisan support. And can I get anyone, any of the vices to speak up if you oppose or have issue with an expansion of junior ROTC programs in our high schools? And we had a 30% increase in authorization last year. We've made it easier for instructors to fill those billets. It's only 2, so you're really only paying half of 2 FTEs. And in my humble opinion, and Senator Wicker and others, you get a better citizen even if you don't get a recruit out of that. So anyone opposed to that initiative? Great. Thank you, and I yield to Mr. Garamendi.
unanimous support for your ideas. I need to know your system. I'm not sure I can do it all. In my opening statement, I focused on the readiness of the aviation systems, and specifically on the number of accidents that have occurred across, well, all but one of your departments. General Mingus, you have the worst record over the last 18 months. So what are you doing about it? What are you doing about aviation safety?
Thank you, sir. And we acknowledge we've had 12 just since last October, which is way too many. Most of those happened in Compo 2, so we have since that time executed a stand down in which about 98% of that is done. Subsequent couple other incidents that we had, so for the broader entire force, we did a stand up, which is where we focused on some specific training objectives without stopping our operational force. The two big keys that we found are in two categories. One is situational awareness, ground awareness, and then tail rotor authority, which used to be one of the core things that we trained in small aircraft. As we have increased the power in a lot of our platforms to the main rotor and not done the same on the tail side, we need to increase that to make sure that the tail rotor authority and how you manage that in the cockpit is satisfied. And then lastly, to your specific question in the budget, we're going to go from 202,000 hours this year to 225,000 next year.
We will be watching. Not that that should scare you any, but the reality is that it's been a very, very bad season for your aviators. For the other departments here, you've had your share of problems in the previous years. You've had somewhat better performance in the more recent, from rollovers, Marine Corps, and on. It's really a culture of safety. We've talked about it here in this committee many, many times. The development of a culture of safety. And we're going to follow up on that and ask the questions through time. Are you really developing a culture of safety in your activities, in your training, and in your ongoing operations? It's across the board. Over the years, I've watched the Navy fail at this. I've watched the Marine Corps, Air Force from time to time, and now it's the Army. So please pay attention to that if you would. I would note that with regard to the availability of ships, there are some very complex but straightforward things that need to be done, and that is before a ship is ever even preparing to go to an availability, which is a real strange name for being unavailable, but for an availability that a whole set of things need to be prepared. What is wrong with the ship? What needs to be updated? What are the long lead time items? And that requires that the day that the ship leaves the availability, presumably back to sea, that every activity on that ship is monitored and kept in real time so that when the availability, whether 18 months, 2 years, whatever the length of time is, that there is a complete list of all that has happened. This is common on aircraft. It is not common on ships. And so we don't have time right now to go into that in detail, but Admiral, please pay attention to that. And we'll follow up and make sure that we do that. With regard to the industrial base, we've talked about that, the shipyards and the like, ongoing issue. Are we spending the money wisely? Also, the private shipyards, more and more needs to be on that. We've talked about some of this being done overseas, away from the home port. Mr. Chairman, I think you mentioned a berthing barge rather, or was bar the right word?
No.
It's a barge.
It's a barge. They're not great.
Are they going to be available overseas? And so the question of where will that availability take place is of great concern to the committee. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to keep to the 5 minutes. And gentlemen, there is another committee hearing. We're going to have to sort out the strategic forces and the readiness occurring at exactly the same moment.
No, it's a conflict with me as well, and the CIA's budget. So Mr. Scott, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Schleif, as you know, Robbins Air Force Base is one of the 3 logistics complexes that the Air Force has. We're responsible for depot maintenance, engineering support, and software development for the F-15, C-5, C-130, C-17, and special operations aircraft. The base has nearly a $4 billion economic impact, the majority of which is in my district, but certainly in the state of Georgia. It employs over 22,000 people. And so my question is, how will Air Force sustainment centers change as the Air Force begins to re-optimize for great power competition?
Thanks, Congressman. So, in a former role as the commander of the Air Force Special Operations Command, I was a customer of Warner Robins Air Logistics Center. It produced all our airplanes for us, did a fantastic job. I will tell you the Air Force has absolutely no intent of stepping back from any part of the three air depot construct that we currently have right now. In terms of what the Sustainment Center is doing to modernize and make sure that our organic depots remain relevant, we're investing heavily in data science and data application in all of our systems. One of the success stories that I would highlight at Warner Robins specifically goes it very closely tracks, I think, the question that Chairman Waltz had for the Navy with respect to the shipyards. And for us, one of our problem children, as you probably know, was the C-5. The Warner Robins Air Logistics Center has decreased the C-5 cycle time going through the depot by over 300 days. Part of the way they were able to do that is very similar to what the Navy is doing, is in packaging the work, making sure all the parts are ordered and packaged ahead of time, so that when an airplane comes into the depot, all the parts are there. There's no diminishing manufacturing source issues to worry about, and we're able to get those airplanes in and out of the depot more quickly. That's all thanks to heavy investment in data science.
I would give a plug to the C-5. I mean, one of the things that I saw many years ago was the assumption that we could count on other countries for lift capacity, for the supersized lift. And obviously that's not the case anymore. I mean, we have to have our lift capacity. So one other question, this is a pretty simple one. I think but $60 billion in Ukraine aid package, can you speak to what that is going to do to help rebuild the depleted Air Force weapon stockpiles, and just briefly on that?
I can, Congressman, thanks. So the weapons that we have contributed to Ukraine out of the Air Force stockpiles, many of them are no longer in production. And so some of the money that is coming with the Ukraine supplemental is specifically to either buy updated weapons to go in our stockpile, or to buy the key components that we need to make older weapons upgraded to current standards. And so the example that I would highlight is the high-speed anti-radiation missile, which is a munition that we use to go after emitting radars on the ground. The Air Force has provided more of those than anything else to Ukraine, but we still need them, and we have some older ones. And so part of that supplemental package is buying the parts kits that we need to upgrade the munitions that we already have to a modern configuration and make sure they've still got good shelf life left for them.
I'm down to 45 seconds, so I'll yield that time. But I do want to say this on the aid package to Ukraine, which I voted for and I think is extremely important. That is one of the things that I don't think the public actually understood in the package, was that we as the United States were going to end up with updated and better weapons in many cases than what we had in our inventory, and it was our older inventory that we actually sent to Ukraine so they could defend themselves against Vladimir Putin's war. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Scott and Mr. Veazey. for your 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Admiral Kilby and General Mahoney, last month the Navy cleared the V-22 Ospreys to fly again. Can you talk about the importance of this aircraft and how its capabilities enhance the operational flexibility and readiness of the Navy and the Marines?
So I'll start. Thanks for that question. The MV-22 is key for our carriers and our ARGs, our big deck amphibs, to maintain those forces at sea. So it is our logistics ship for the future. The carrier had a COD C2, which is being phased out. It's going to be replaced by the MV-22, and we'll be able to do lift at night and day. Similarly for the ARG, it will complement the Marine Corps, but also provide that lift for the ships at sea from a parts perspective, et cetera. And it's key to the Marine Corps. I defer to you, Mo.
Sure. Sir, thanks. The MV-22 for us, I think we're in a little bit of a different boat. We have a program of record of about 360. We require 185 of these, which is much more than any of the other services. So the stand down hurt us for about 75% of our assault support. It is critical for our lift capability on the ARGs, for our lift capability in support of contested logistics. So to have the V-22 back in battery is absolutely critical to the Marine Corps. It's our workhorse.
Oh yeah, no, that's good to hear. Are there any plans to expand its use or modify based on recent safety reviews?
There's ongoing improvements to the gearbox, which sits at the end of each wing. And there are ongoing improvements to the flight computer and other aspects of the airplane.
I also wanted to ask you about the F-35 Lightning. I know that last week the Navy released a remarkable photo of a Marine flight crew in a CH-53K Stallion, and it was transporting an F-35C Lightning to airframe while air-to-air refueling from a Navy C-130. The photo, I thought, showcased some aerial maneuvers involving multiple aircraft types, and I wanted to ask you, what does this display say about the interoperability and coordination between the different branches and aircraft types within the DoD, and what can we expect during potential future conflict?
Well, I think it shows very close integration between the Navy and the Marine Corps, but what you saw there was a monster, CH-53K, which is the most modern heavy lift, the only heavy lift aircraft that we're introducing to the DoD. It will replace the CH-53E, which quite frankly has been a workhorse, but has seen its day.
How does the introduction of newer models like the 53K fit into the broader strategy of fleet modernization and capability enhancement?
For the Marine Corps, over the last at least dozen years, we have transitioned our entire air wing. F-35, CH-53Ks, V-22s, KC-130Js, the entire panoply of the type model series that we fly have been transitioned. And once again, CH-53K, faster, farther, with a bigger payload and more technology built into that airplane than the DoD has seen, and the ability to, as you saw, lift just about anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know that the Marines noted the need for 2 additional CH-53K aircraft on their UPL. Can you talk about the importance of obtaining these additional assets?
And our UPL does a couple of things. It fights for if there are extra resources that come out in the cycle, and it indicates our desire to accelerate programs. And CH-53K is one of those programs that we would like to get more sooner, get out of old metal and get into new metal.
Yeah. Admiral Kilby, I want to ask you, the F-35 that is featured in the photo is now a non-flying test model. How does the Navy manage and utilize retired aircraft for testing and development purposes?
I'm going to take that question and get you a more
Okay.
formal answer.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we are member complete. Mr. Moore, we are not. Time on target. 5 minutes. Your 5 minutes, Mr. Moore.
Thank you. It's as if I never left. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I really appreciate being able to be here today. As a former member of this committee, it's a privilege to wave on for this hearing and discuss some of the issues critically important to our readiness. One of my roles in Congress is serving as the co-chair of the House Military Depot and Industrial Facilities Caucus alongside my colleague, Matt Cartwright from Pennsylvania. Our government-owned, government-operated depots are essential to the repair and maintenance of our nation's weapon systems. They operate during times when it is not profitable for private industry to do so and enable military services to maintain key capabilities in times of both peace and war. However, minimum investment requirements designed only to sustain depot performance have left most depots in poor condition, as we all know and have discussed today, relying on outdated equipment for past service, past its life. Among other things, a 2022 GAO report confirmed that delays in depot maintenance limit the Air Force's ability to keep aviation units ready by reducing the number of aircraft available to squadrons for full spectrum training. Addressing poor conditions at depots will not only cost billions and require sustained management attention for over many years, but it will also require creativity and forward thinking from decision makers. General Slife, we've talked previously, I represent Hill Air Force Base, Air Logistics Complex, all of the maintenance and sustain work that's done there, that's been done for so many years, and with a great relationship with the community as well as the Air Force. So many positives. This is a big deal for our nation, for our readiness, for Hill Air Force Base. How can the Air Force ensure they account for future technological demands, changing labor needs, and threats to facility security when modernizing our depots and air logistics complexes?
Thanks for the question, Congressman. We have a roadmap for depot modernization. In response to a previous question, I talked about the Air Force's absolute commitment to holding on to 3 depots, provides a valuable national asset in terms of government-operated depot capacity. But we recognize that we need to modernize these. Part of this is the IT systems, making sure we have a heavy investment in the data underpinning that is required for all of our sustainment work. But it's also the basic hardware that goes into the depot. And so we've got a roadmap that talks about how we will keep all 3 of our depots modernized. And so be happy to provide that to you separately, Congressman. With respect to specifically Hill and the Ogden Air Logistics Complex there, as you know, that is front and center for most of our fighter platforms. Right. And so most of our fighter platforms, particularly the newer ones as they come on, are very software intensive. And so one of the things that we really value about the center at Hill is the heavy investment in software engineering that goes on there, and the government architectures that they're able to support and turn capabilities onto our frontline fighters a whole lot faster than perhaps our adversaries would. So committed to the depot construct, and happy to provide you information on our modernization plan.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And you brought up exactly what I wanted to just touch on next. The nation's 3 air logistics complexes ensure the U.S. Air Force can rapidly respond to global challenges by prepping supplies for immediate deployment and sustaining equipment that can be returned quickly into that theater on short notice. Their strategic importance as maintaining U.S. air readiness and effectiveness cannot be overstated. In the event of a peer-to-peer conflict in the Indo-Pacific, for example, we would be suddenly faced with the need to integrate with our allies into a wider sustainment network of air power. How is the Air Force engaging with Indo-Pacific partners regarding the sustainment and depot maintenance side of the readiness discussions? Just give me a little bit of perspective on that.
Yeah, we have a number of partnerships with commercial depot service providers throughout the Indo-Pacific region that gives us capacity that we need, number one. Number two, for those forward-based fighter platforms, it saves us having to drag them all the way across the Pacific Ocean and back. So we invest in that, and plus in times of conflict, it provides additive capacity that's available to us. And so while we rely most heavily on our organic depot capacity, we do have a global network that we rely on as well.
For fear of, going over my time anymore, Chairman, thank you so much. General, appreciate all of your engagement and your commitment to this really important effort. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Good to have you back. Mr. Scott, do you want a second round of questions? And I yield to you.
Admiral Kirby, the Navy has requested $48 billion for naval and shipbuilding capabilities and $9 billion to improve public repair yards through the Shipyard Infrastructure Organizational Plan. I met with General Van Oost a couple of months ago. I understand the urgency of building and modernizing the fleet if we're to be prepared for the contingencies around the world. I know we have a need for warships and submarines and aircraft carriers and the things that we all like to talk about, but we also have a need for just the organic sea lift capabilities. And, you know, on average, these sea lift ships are 45 years old. Is that correct?
I'll check on that exact number, but I believe you are correct.
I think I'm pretty close to that. So my question is, if current domestic shipbuilding capacity does not allow for the construction of both warships and sea lift ships, wouldn't it make sense that we would build the warships here inside the United States and look to some of the other countries where they build the sea lift ships in just tremendous quantities, and perhaps we could get a better deal?
Yes, sir. I defer to the Assistant Secretary for Research, Development, and Acquisition, but I will tell you, I believe that our Sea Lift Recap Plan focuses on taking care of the ships we have, buying used ships, of which we have an authorization from you to buy 9, and we expect to reach that limit at the end of 2025, and buying new ships. To your point about maintaining those ships, we appreciate the support of the committee on all industrial base investments for us from a submarine industrial base perspective and a surface ship industrial base perspective to get at the problem you highlight. Over.
Yeah. It just, well, thank you. And it just seems to me that, you know, the warships we obviously want to build here are certainly from, you know, an allied partner, but if it's just a roll-on, roll-off container ship, there are other countries out there. South Korea builds them by the dozens. I think we build about one every 2 to 3 years, and so that was my primary question, Chairman. Is there are better ways for us to solve the problems in a more cost-effective manner, and that's one that I think we need to take a serious look at. And look, I know we need the U.S. shipyards, but let's have them focus on the specialty craft that we need to fight the fight, what we consider to be the warships, and let's, some of this generic stuff, let's go for the best deal we can get, the best value we can get. With that, I yield. Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. And I will, Mr. Moore, do you have any additional questions? And if not, then I'll yield to myself before
sir.
we
Thank
have
you.
to go to votes. Great, then I'll yield to myself for the balance of the time, and if you change your mind, Mr. Moore, let me know. We have votes coming up. But just a few follow-ups. I want to go back to barracks. Joe Mahoney, thank you for your answer. To the other witnesses, my understanding is you have not submitted anything in your unfunded priority list for barracks. So that leads me and the committee to assume, correct me if I'm wrong, please, on the record, that you have all the funding you need to fix this problem. Is that correct? Start with you, General Mingus.
The chief did put a couple of Milcon barracks projects in his unfunded priority list, but it was also a big portion of our base budget for this year. Increased the overall for Milcon. We're going to average about $2.1 billion a year over the next several years in terms of what we've programmed. 100% sustainment cost, vice what we've done in the past, which is a portion of that. the barracks managers, and then from a strategy standpoint, where the Secretary is trying to take us is, because 80% of our barracks fall into the Q1 or Q2 category, so really honing in on the ones that are the Q3 to bring them up to standard. Those that are not salvageable will reduce and rebuild. And then to your point, how do we maximize the commercial private lease kind of component of that? So those are kind of the three elements of her strategy going forward, sir.
Hey, Chairman, thank you for the question. I agree, and I won't repeat what General Mingus said about the way to attack this problem. For us, we have $206 million in FY25, $1.2 billion across the FITIP for 55 projects. But we've got work to do. We've got to fix our unaccompanied housing, bring up our quality of service over time. We're not at the benchmark of having all 90% of our unaccompanied housing at a condition code of 90 or above. We're right at 58%. So we've got work to do here. But FRA caps caused us to produce and submit the best budget we could.
General Slife.
Chairman, thanks. The short answer to your question is that we believe we are adequately funded in the budget. 99.3% of Air Force unaccompanied housing beds are exceed the standard, at or exceed the standard. The Air Force has invested heavily in our unaccompanied housing over the last 5 years or so. That remains healthy through the budget year. So we believe we're adequately funded with the President's request.
Okay, line.
Yes, sir. So the Space Force has 28 military dorms. They are funded and they're kept up. We modernize one dorm a year based on the current FISRM funds that we are budgeting for. Our average index right now is an 81, which is above average, but we were striving to get to 85. We can always use more funds, but we believe we are fully funded in the 25 budget. Over.
You could always use more funds, but you believe you're fully funded to get to 85?
Yes, sir. We would like to get, we are not funded to get to 85. We're funded at 81. We'd like to get to 85.
How about we get to 100?
That would be amazing, sir.
But you're not funded at this point.
We are not funded.
Do you have it on your unfunded?
Yes, sir. $279 million.
You know what? I think for the record, can I ask each of you to come back? We have your your relative service assistant secretaries, their testimony in terms of backlog. I mean, we're just talking, right, getting to a decent baseline point. We're not even talking about what it's going to take to dig out of the backlog. So can each of you come back to the committee as a question for the record on, we just need a common picture of what it's going to take to dig out of this hole. 20 years of war, all kinds of other priorities, O&M and FSRM always seem to be the bill payer one way or another. So if I could ask that of you, if I could go back to you, Admiral Kilby, and to Mr. Scott's questions on Sealift. I think a bright spot right now is the NSMV program, right? Is the for everybody who's not familiar with the acronym, the National Security Multi-Mission Vessel Program. The Empire State's the one that's being built in the Philly shipyard. It's being built under a concept, the VCM, the Vessel Construction Manager concept. I know that would have real issues on your warships, but we're talking about expanding the fleet that the Army needs to get somewhere. And we literally had hundreds of ships in the first Gulf War, and we're now down to dozens, and many of them are dozens of years old. It is a chronic issue that we've been talking about my entire time in Congress, and it just never seems to really get the attention that it's need. And I don't think 9 ships is going to do it. What would be the Navy's approach to migrating the VCM concept more broadly? Or would you have, as an institution, would you have issue with it?
Again, a little out of my expertise range as a non-acquisition guy. in concept, I think in agreement, we want to have more lift and more capability. So I'll ask Chairman if I can come back with you from some specifics there. But sea lift is important for us. We do want to have the capacity we need. We realize we've got a logistic challenge in the Pacific, and we've got to meet that need.
But we're not seeing budget requests to meet the need. I mean, and I get it. You've got to make choices. We continue to not make that choice between both the Army and the Navy, frankly. I mean, one of the reasons the pier in Gaza is delayed, whether you agree or disagree with it, one of the Army ships caught on fire. Another one was so old that it had to turn around. As we talk to General Van Ovost and we look at our sea lift capability, I mean, essentially our build is flat, but when you compare that with retirements and decommission, we're losing capacity year to year. So I would I would ask you for a follow-on meeting. We will certainly have it with General Van Ovost. We're looking at what can we change in this dynamic with MARAD. One of the things that's under discussion is, do we give MARAD a separate budget line? And I know that would probably rattle a lot of cages in the building, but we're just not getting there in terms of the capability that we need, gentlemen. And I mean, I look at the last major turbo activation that they've had, and it's 9-10 ships. I mean, and that's all the funding they have, and you don't even get to exercise the ships. They're out for a couple of days versus a couple of months that they really need. So I would really look and we'll have this conversation with the Secretary tomorrow as well, but it is a chronic issue that I think you have bipartisan support here, and I know we have Mr. Garamendi's support to try to, or we start tapping into the Jones Act fleet or something different than just chipping away at the problem. So I'd welcome your engagement on that. And then I'll just conclude, unless you have any more, Mr. Scott or Mr. Moore. I mean, take a step back and look at from the American people's standpoint, and when they look at and I know the number's a little dated, but I'm betting it's about accurate. When they look at our amphibious fleet at 32%, when they look at Joint Strike Fighter full mission capable at 29%, when they look at subsurface at 60%, 40% of our last major strategic advantage with the PRC is our subsurface fleet, and 40% can't get out of the yard. When they look at the recruiting crisis, when they look at just a sample, 10 out of 500 barracks, 10 that the GAO looked at, and they find feces and mold that our soldiers and sailors and Marines are living in. I mean, we need to I think we need to take a step back. I know you guys are all your staff behind you chopping at this every day, but something is inherently systemically wrong with our readiness enterprise. And whether that balance of modernization is out of whack with readiness, I don't know. But as long as we are in this position, this committee, we're going to do what we can to shift this dynamic. Because those numbers, I mean, I could keep going. Does anybody disagree that we need some major improvements in those numbers? Our key projection platform for the Marines, our top fighter across the services, and our key strategic advantage against the PRC under their missile barrage are all abysmal, or not where they need to be. So I look forward to working with you. I thank you for your testimony today, and please consider us an advocate to try to get our readiness to a better place. Thank you, and hearing concludes.